Wednesday, July 19th. It's about 10:05 in the evening. We're having a look at that rather large, glorious planetary nebula we discovered in last night's observation series, NGC 6772, Planetary Nebula in Aquila, magnitude 14, 75 by 55 arc seconds, basically around 1 arc minute in size. Its central star is magnitude 18.1. It's 4,100 light years distant. I think I've got it positioned well on the screen. Hopefully most everything we see tonight will be right there in the contrast region on the screen. We were getting some pretty good views last night with some decent renderings. The stars are still a little bit pigged out using the Revolution 2 imaging system. Could use some better artistic rendering in that direction, but at least we get a chance to see really deep and faint studies. And we've discovered that we're getting down to magnitude 17 stars, which is very impressive. Certainly, if we only had the resolution of a 24 to 36 inch telescope, that would be astounding. But we'll just have to go ahead and appreciate the fact that we can actually see such faint planetaries, clusters, and most of all, galaxies. Tonight, as we approach sky dark, we're going to be exploring the 6800 to 6850 series. There's about 35 studies in that series that should be accessible to the telescope. In the observatory, we're blocked to the north, so we don't get very high above, excuse me, some 45 degrees north declination. And we are blocked by some fruiting trees to the south. If we go directly south at culmination, we can typically get down to at least minus 35 degrees declination. So that, once again, there's some kind of a scent entering into the observatory. Here we have NGC 6800, open cluster in Vulpecula, a mere 5 arc minutes in size. It says it only has 20 stars, the brightest of which are magnitude 10. It's a class 3-2, which means the stars are fairly far apart, probably well less than 1 per cubic light year, as per yesterday's calculations. 2, for instance, in a cubic light year in the Pleiades Messier 45, with some variation in brightness because it's a class 2. So it's a Roman letter 3, widely spaced, and 2 moderately disparate magnitudes, 3,300 light years distant. We're almost 19 and a half hours in now to the right ascension, and our declination is plus 25 degrees. There's our look, and boy, are there some stars all over that field. NGC 6802 with another open cluster in Vulpecula, magnitude 8.8, pretty tight, 3.2 arc minutes, some 50 stars, the brightest of which are magnitude 12.9. It's a class Roman letter numeral 3, which typically means well spread out, but all the stars are 1, numeric 1, which means they're all pretty much of the same magnitude. It's 3,700 light years out. It's hard for me to believe it is a class 3 at 3 arc minutes with so many stars. 3,700 light years distant, plus 20 degrees declination. That looks pretty compact to me, so it may be mischaracterized. It looks more like a 1, Roman numeral 1 or 2. We need to watch the next one form on the screen. It's NGC 6803, a planetary nebula. I'll give you the data. Why don't you go ahead and look at the screen and see if something slowly emerges. Not sure what its size is, but it seemed pretty distant when I looked at the initial data. Another star-rich region of the Milky Way in Aquila. The Eagle. NGC 6803 is planetary nebula in Aquila. Magnitude 11, a mere 4 arc seconds in size. So The central star is magnitude 14, so this is all going to blend together on the screen. 17,200 light years distant, plus 10 degrees above the celestial equator, and boy, is that screen just screaming stars. NGC 6804 is another planetary nebula in Aquila, and I got it onto the camera a little bit late. Brightish at magnitude 12.4, but spread out over 63 by 50 arc seconds. It's got a central star of magnitude 14.2. It's 5,600 light years distant, and I think this one's pretty obvious on the screen. Keep an eye out for that magnitude 14.2 central star, but this one seems fairly obvious from my vantage. Another planetary nebula, this one NGC 6807, so let's see if we can watch it emerge. Give you some data on it momentarily. NGC 6807, planetary nebula in Aquila, magnitude 13.8, but a mere 2 arc seconds. Wow, the central star is magnitude 13.9. 40,900 light years distant. This is on the far side of our galaxy for sure. And being able to actually be seen and discovered through all those stars is quite astonishing. We will have a very difficult time finding anything like this on the screen. The Sky Live may have a nice DSS image of it, digitized sky survey using the Palomar, I believe, 48-inch Schmidt camera. This is plus almost 6 degrees declination, so not a bad part of the sky. I doubt we'll be able to actually see this. It will take some sleuthing to figure out which of the multitude of luminous stars that's on the screen would be, in fact, planetary nebula 6807. NGC 6811, very far north. I think I may be losing just a little bit of aperture of the roof try. NGC 6811 is an open cluster in Cygnus, magnitude 6.8, 13 arc minutes, claims only 70 stars. Its brightest stars are magnitude 9.9. It's 4,000 light years distant. It's at plus 46.5 degrees, which means we're pretty close to losing it. It's a class 4-3. Class 4 means the stars are fairly far apart. 3 means they have fairly disparate magnitudes. But as far as I can tell, this baby is pretty well defined on the screen. Somewhere on the screen, slowly emerging, is neither galaxy nor planetary. This is a nebula in Vulpecula. It's 3 arc minutes in size. It should be fairly large. It's an emission nebula. So it's at plus 27 degrees declination, but 3 arc minutes in size, and there's no indication as to how bright this nebula is. We'll just have to, once again, if it's not obvious, we'll have to consult the digitized sky survey on the Sky Live. If it's accessible, to determine where it might be in this huge morass of stars. Well, here we have a rather obvious face-on galaxy. NGC 6814, and we're looking right through the Milky Way to see it. It's a galaxy in Aquila, magnitude 11.2, 3.3 by 3.3 arc minutes in size, a spiral with a large bar, has a ring, a lowercase bc attributes, 70 million light years distant. So it's not a particularly large galaxy, maybe 10 or 15,000 light years in diameter. It's also fairly low in the sky at minus 10 degrees, but it's pretty obvious on the screen. Now keep in mind that a face-on like this, the ring and other components of the spiral are going to be some 4.5 magnitudes fainter. So we would have to be able to see to like almost magnitude 16 tonight, and to be able to get a sense of the extensions and the ring. And I think we're pretty close to getting that right now. This is a good look. NGC 6815 is an open cluster in Vulpecula, a mere 3 arc minutes in size. It's fairly diffuse, class 4, Roman numeral 2, so its stars only have a moderate amount of brightness distribution. 6,600 light years distant. It's at almost plus 27 degrees declination, so it's pretty much in the dark part of the sky, and we're into sky dark now. There are so many stars on the screen. Discerning which of them actually comprise the open cluster is a bit of a challenge because it isn't obvious, is it? 6818, planetary nebula in Sagittarius, magnitude 10. Fairly large, 22 by 15 arc seconds, so it should be resolvable. The central star is magnitude 15, and it's 6,700 light years distant at a declination of minus 14 degrees. Wow, NGC 6819 is a very obvious open cluster in Cygnus. I'm surprised it's not also Messier. Its magnitude is 7.3. It's condensed down to about 5 arc minutes. Its brightest stars are magnitude 11.5. It is a class 1-1, which means very condensed, and all of its stars are very close in magnitude, 7,700 light years distant. This should make an excellent 40 degrees declination positive. This should make an excellent study for some kind of mathematical analysis to see how it compares to A, the Pleiades as the open cluster standard, and B, the Messier 4 as a globular cluster standard, using both kinds of mathematical techniques. Very, very beautiful cluster. Wow. NGC 6820 is a nebula in Vulpecula, magnitude 15, almost maybe 3/4 of an arc minute in size, 40 by 30 arc seconds, 6,000 light years distant, and plus 23 degrees, which means it should be in a fairly dark sky region. At magnitude 15, we should see it. It should have a faintness about it, but there could be intervening stars. I think I'm seeing something there. So there's looks like there's a star a little bit on the lower extremity of the nebulosity, which may actually be the illuminating source for the nebulosity. NGC 6821 is a rather obvious face-on galaxy in Aquila. It's magnitude 13.1, 1.3 by 1.1 arc minutes. It's a spiral with a large bar, and it has some other denominations, lowercase cd. At 68 million light years distant, so it's not a particularly large, probably about 30,000 light years in diameter. It's at minus almost 7 degrees declination. But it's interesting to subject this to some mathematical rigor because we're looking at it through the Milky Way galaxy, and you wonder how much of its brightness is lost due to intervening gas and dust. Should be interesting from that point of view. Okay, here's another galaxy. This one's in Sagittarius, which means it should even be thicker there. NGC 6822 is magnitude 8.8. Whoa. 15.4 by 14.2 arc minutes, which means its luminosity pretty much should fill the screen. It's an irregular galaxy, a mere 1.8 million light years distant. So I've attempted to turn this one up before, haven't had much luck, but I have seen it in the eyepiece of a 6-inch telescope. The problem we're having here is because we're not getting enough delineation and contrast to be able to tell because basically the boundaries of this galaxy fall almost beyond the range of the screen, which is 15 by 20 arc minutes. Sure would be nice if we could get some sense of definition of its frontier. NGC 6823 is a rather obvious open cluster in Vulpecula, but it also has nebulosity in it, which means it's a birthing cluster at this point. Progenitor star is pretty bright there. It's magnitude 7.1. It's 12 arc minutes in size. It's got about 30 stars, and its brightest star is magnitude 8.8, which typically means, yeah, that's the progenitor. That's the baby who's throwing out all the radiation that's causing the ripples in the cold dark matter, which results in what are called Bach globules, which then gravitationally condense to form protostars. It's a class 1-3. So the stars are fairly close together, but there's quite a variation in the brightness, disparate brightness. 10,400 light years distance and plus 23 degrees in terms of declination. NGC 6826 is a planetary in Cygnus, but we're not seeing it all with all the aperture of the scope because it's being partially blocked by the roof try. This one's pretty bright though, in magnitude 8.8. It's 27 by about half an arc minute, 27 by 24 arc seconds. The central star is magnitude 10.7, so it's bound to bloat out. It's 5,200 light years distant, and we're pushing it by going to plus 50 degrees northern declination, but I think it's pretty much right there on the screen, even though we're not getting a full look of it at it. NGC 6827 is a small 2 arc minute size open cluster in Vulpecula. It's located some 13,400 light years distant. It's at plus 21 degrees. There's no other information on this, and oftentimes that means there's very little information available, although I occasionally have found some. Very difficult to recognize where on the screen the open cluster is, but I guess it's probably right there, right at the tip of my finger. NGC 6828 is an open cluster in Aquila. This one's larger, 12 by 10 arc minute, but it should fit in the screen, 2,000 light years distant, which is about 4 times that of Messier 45, which put this thing at about maybe 1/3 the size of 45, the Pleiades, which means it's probably about 3 light years across, 3 to 4 light years across. It's at plus almost 8 degrees declination. I hope we can pick it out. It looks a little bit challenging, but it also looks like there might be some nebulosity up there as well, but I can't be sure. NGC 6830. Also an open cluster. This one's in Vulpecula, magnitude 7.9, 12 arc minutes in size, so it should fit into the screen. A mere 20 stars, magnitude 9.9 is the brightest one. It's a class Roman number 2, numeric 2, which means middling in terms of proximity of the stars and middling in terms of the distribution of their brightness. At 5,300 light years. It's plus 23 degrees declination, and the stars should be all over the screen, although I can see some condensation towards the center of the screen. NGC 6833 is a planetary nebula in Cygnus, magnitude 13.8, a mere 2 arc seconds in size, which will blend completely with its magnitude 15.1 central star. 15,600 light years distant. It's at plus 49 degrees, and we are getting some obstruction of the objective lens at this time at the roof because we are getting closer to culmination with this one. So, 6833, planetary nebula. Hopefully we'll find it somewhere on the screen. NGC 6834 is an obvious open cluster in Cygnus. Its magnitude is 7.8, 5 arc minutes in size. It says 50 stars, the brightest of which is magnitude 9.6. It's a class 2-2, which means middling in terms of the distribution of the stars and middling in terms of their brightness. 6,700 light years distant, almost plus 30 degrees in declination, so decent sky position. NGC 6835 is an obvious edge-on galaxy in Sagittarius, magnitude 12.5, 2.4 by 0.7 arc-minutes in size, a spiral with a large bar, 71 million light years distant. I wager this one is a super dwarf, probably 60 to 70,000 light years in diameter, smaller than our own and less than half the size of Messier 31. It's at minus 12.5 degrees declination, and it is giving a very beautiful edge-on view. Gotta love that. Right on the high contrast region of the screen. Not far from galaxy NGC 6835 is another galaxy in Sagittarius. This one's magnitude 12.9, but it's more face-on, 1.7 by 1.5 arc-minutes, spiral with a bar, and it has a lowercase m, which I'm not familiar with. Probably about the same size as the last one, 72 million light years distant, so they may actually be part of the same group. It's at declination almost minus 13 degrees, and we are approaching right ascension 1955, which means we'll be exiting into a 20 hour at some point, if not this evening, and later. NGC 6837 is an open cluster in Aquila, magnitude 12. Very interesting. It's 6 by 3 arc-minutes, so it's kind of oblate. It's a class 4, which means the stars are pretty far apart, although at the same time they are roughly the same magnitude. It is some 3,100 light years distant and almost 12 degrees above the celestial equator. This will be our first study in Sagitta, the arrow. NGC 6838, globular cluster in Sagitta. It's also known as Messier 71. It's one of the fainter Messiers at magnitude 8.3, 6.1 arc-minutes in size, and the brightest star is at magnitude 12.1, which means there's only a 4 magnitude difference. It's probably fairly disparate, doesn't give the class. Anyway, it's 12,000 light years distant and almost 19 degrees north declination, but a fine look despite all the many other stars in the field. NGC 6840 is an open cluster in Aquila, 8 by 10 arc-minutes in size, so it should fit on the screen, 6,400 light years distant. It's at a declination of plus 12 degrees, so a decent part of the sky. NGC 6842 is a planetary nebula in Vulpecula, magnitude 13.1, largish, 53 by 48 arcseconds. I can see it forming on the screen right now. It's giving a good view. The central star is magnitude 14.5, and it's 4,500 light years distant and about 29 degrees north of declination. I can see the central star even from my angle and the nebulosity. A good look. NGC 6843, open cluster in Aquila, 6 by 8 arc-minutes, 6,300 light years distant, and there's no other data on it, which means this one would be a really nice one to do some math on. It's at plus 12 degrees declination, and we are now approaching the 20th hour of right ascension. NGC 6846, open cluster in Cygnus, magnitude 14.2. Whoa. It's a half an arc-minute in size. Its brightest stars are magnitude 15. It's a class 4-1, which means the stars are broadly distributed at a distance of 14,500 light years, but they are all of the relatively the same brightness, which probably is what makes it apparent, because it's only a half an arc-minute in size. Yeah, I can see it on the screen. Very intriguing. 32, almost 32.5 degrees in declination. NGC 6847 is a nebula, an open cluster, star-forming region in Cygnus at a distance of 6,200 light years. It's at plus 30 degrees. There's no more information on it other than that. I could not tell you where it is on the screen. We'll have to look at the DSS images to do so. But there we have it. It's not a dumbbell, it's a football. Messier 27, NGC 6853. Carpe Noctem to you all.